بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وآله وصحبه ومن والاه. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد الآمن وصحبه وسلم. آمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In brief, I want to address a question that I have heard from particularly non-Muslims who ask, why do we have requirements in Zabiha halal slaughter? Why do Muslims have slaughter requirements? Why do Muslims slaughter by slitting the throat, and so on? Oftentimes you hear Muslims try to answer with the wisdom behind it and not the actual reason. They will say, for example, this is the most merciful way to slaughter. This is why we slaughter this way. And they'll rebut, well, what about stunning and blah, blah, blah. And so on. You'll hear discussions go back and forth about things. So whenever you ask and answer the question of why do Muslims do X, Y, Z, especially when it pertains to the Sharia, the answer has two parts that we need to understand here. The first is that there's the hikmah and then there's the illah. The hikmah, the wisdom, the illah, the reason for the ruling. Okay, the illah, whenever you're asking about the Sharia, is almost always because Allah told us to. That's the reason why. Why do women wear hijab? Because Allah commanded them to. Why do men have a different hijab? Because that's what Allah commanded us to do. That's what He determined the awra, the nakedness of a person to be, of a man or a woman. Why do we slaughter a certain way? Because Allah commanded us to. That is the reason why. This is the illah. The illah is that in the Quran, in Surah Al-Ma'idah and Surah Al-An'am, we have rules for how we slaughter and for the meat we eat and the meat we do not eat. This is in the Quran. He says, eat this, don't eat that. This is good for you, this is not good for you. This is what I command you to do. And this is the reason why. This is the illah. So if anybody asks you, why do we slaughter this way? It's because Allah commanded us to. God told us to do it this way. This is the reason why. The hikmah, the wisdom behind it, now that can be very detailed. The more you think about it, the more you may see different wisdoms in it. It could even be endless. There could be hundreds or even thousands of wisdoms in the Sharia and at any point that can go on endlessly. The reason, one hikmah may be that perhaps it is very merciful to the animal. Yes, it is. For example, part of these requirements are that the animals has 4 veins in the neck. Most of them need to be cut and bled out, so the animal needs to bleed out. Anybody who knows anything about animal, anatomy and physiology and bleeding an animal and slaughtering and such will tell you, you need to bleed the animal before you eat it in order for it to be good meat. This is basic hikmah, and it's also the illah. Another is that the name of Allah needs to be pronounced over it, actually or effectively, as we call it. What does that mean? Effectively means that if someone is like regularly slaughtering and they would normally say the name of Allah, but they forgot, then in that one instance, then they can still say it afterwards, according to many scholars. Another is that the one slaughtering has to either be a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian. They cannot be any other religion in order for this to be permissible. So there you have it. It's very simple. Now there's other adab, etiquettes with the animal. For example, it should not be panicking. It should not see the knife. It should not see other animals being slaughtered. You never slaughter an animal in front of other animals. They will get upset, so you don't upset the animal. A good one is to blindfold them, to calm them. It's good to feed them water before slaughtering. And it's good to be kind to them, and so on and so forth. There's all these etiquettes that are on top of this that are really good. Not for this video, but there's other videos someone should probably do where they go over etiquettes of slaughter and teach us about that. I hope a scholar will do that if they haven't already. But they're all very sensible and reasonable, and any rational human being will agree with all of this. Another is the concept of stunning. A lot of people think it's like you either are Zabiha halal or you are stunning. Well, there's discussion over the permissibility of stunning. It can be, like for example, New Zealand meat is almost all halal. It's pretty much almost all halal. they did that to increase the buyers available in their market for their meat, because they have good agriculture and farming and such, and they do stun before they slaughter. So then scholars debate on stun slaughter, and the question is the animal dying from the cut and the bleeding, or are they dying from the stun? You cannot kill an animal with the stun. They have to die from bleeding with the cut. So they have to bleed out and so on. So there's scholars who will discuss the conditions of a stun slaughter to be permissible. So yes, it's possible to have a stun slaughter that is still halal and zabiha completely. So that's another issue people have. So, part of the issue with Islam is there's a lot of people not getting educated, and maybe they don't know how or where to get educated. So it's important to know what your resources are. It's important to be in touch with people who are scholars or students of knowledge who can properly answer your questions. And another note, there's a lot of normal Muslims who haven't been through madrasa, haven't really studied the deen. They have some basic knowledge for their own practice, but they really don't know how to answer these types of questions. So if you ask the average Muslim these questions, you'll get a lot of different answers, because they actually don't know the answer correctly. They don't know how to correctly answer these questions. They'll probably get close to the answer, but they don't actually know how to answer the question unless they themselves have first been educated, and most have not. Most have not gone to a madrasa for even 1 year, let alone 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 7, or even 15, to graduate through all these different levels of education in Islam. And that's why you get so many different answers. So it's important for Muslims to get educated, to learn how to answer questions, and when they are asked questions, to do their best to properly answer them. Another note too is that there's always going to be more lay Muslims than scholars by a huge ratio generally, and so you're always going to have non-Muslims interacting with lay Muslims and also converting to Islam through their interactions with lay Muslims. So if you are a non-scholar like me, then I recommend that you get in touch with scholars, get educated to the highest level that you can with your free time, and do your best in giving da'wah and talking to non-Muslims about the truth. So one thing I want to say as well is that everything good comes from Allah. Okay, everything evil is attributed to the creation. Okay, this is a basic principle. It's in the Quran and Hadith. Ash-sharu laysa ilayk. This is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's in Ibn Kathir in Surah Al-Layl, and other narrations we have that all good is from Allah. So, for example, in the Qunut. So, when it comes to Allah's Sharia, His law, His way of living for us, okay, there's nothing bad about it. It's only good, actually. There's nothing ever bad in the Sharia. Ever. It's impossible. It's literally impossible. Why? Because God sent it down, and He doesn't send bad things to us. Bad things come from Satan. They come from misunderstandings of the nafs. They come from the creation. Bad things do not ever come from God. Okay. Now, in some cases in the past, He destroyed nations like the people of Noah and the people of Lot and so on. This is because they rejected their prophets. They did a ton of evil, and it was better for the rest of mankind that these people be destroyed. That is the reason why. And these, for example, the people of Noah, they were destroyed because they kept misguiding every generation. It happened so many generations that they were constantly misguiding people that it's just evil to lead people to associating partners with God. You don't want to come into this world, because the reality of human beings is that our souls come into this world when we're born. Rather in the womb. It's not, we're not just cells and brains. We have souls. And those souls that have not been born yet they exist now. They exist now, and they're waiting for their time to come down here. And when they come down here, we want them to have the best environment, to have a good return to God while they're here, and to die in a good state. So if you have an entire nation of evildoers who are leading people to Satan, it's good for them to be destroyed in that case, and to be replaced with people who have the correct religion and the correct beliefs. Now, this doesn't mean human beings go and do that. This is something Allah did. It's His intiqam, it's His punishment. on them in this world. It's not something human beings ever do. We don't annihilate people. The Muslims had many chances to annihilate people. They never, ever did, ever. There's no such thing in Islamic history as a genocide. It doesn't exist, ever. It never happened in 1400 years. The only time you ever see Muslims committing it is after the influence of Europe on some of the Turks, like the Young Turks and such, who went and moved and killed some Armenians out of their country. That's the only time that ever happened. And then there's debate on whether or not it's a genocide. And of course, the Europeans want to exaggerate the numbers as much as possible, and the Turks downplay it and whatever. The discussion is really not the point of this. The point I'm getting at is that that's the only time it ever happened in over 1,000 years of Islamic history on every continent. And Islam was in the Americas as well. It was a tiny minority, but it was there for hundreds of years. It's been there for hundreds of years. Before Christopher Columbus, Islam was already there. And we have proof of that. Of course, the Americans would hate to admit this. Eventually, I think they're going to in the next 50 years or so, maybe shorter than that, maybe 20 or 10 even. Some of their scholars are starting to come around, the historians, as they see the proofs and evidences, because they try to hide these things and lie. But the point being is that and Islam has been on every continent except Antarctica, I guess, and it's never ever happened ever. It never happens. So that's an important point. Look into the past, at the good examples of the past, and follow their good example. Ihdina siratal mustaqim, guide us to the straight path. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim, the path of those whom you have blessed, you have favored. Why? Because they did things His way, they did things right. He chose them, He gave them the law, He gave them taqwa, He gave them good things in their heart, He gave them good hearts. And these are people who would rather die than do things, than make critical errors. These people would rather die than do things that are evil. They only do good, and where they falter, they repent. These are saintly people. We want to follow their example. So everything good comes from Allah. When it comes to His law, you follow it, you get more good. You only get more good doing it His way. Because that's what we're here to do. We're here to follow Him. Where we falter, we repent. Okay, so do the best you can to follow His law. Another thing too is that if you're not ready to fully follow His law, or you're making mistakes, or there's something He commanded you're not doing, it doesn't mean you disbelieve in it. It means you say, okay, He commanded us to do this. To be a Muslim, you have to admit that and you have to believe that. Okay, He commanded me to pray, but maybe I'm missing a prayer. Okay, I know He commanded me to pray it. I know it's fard. I know that it's mandatory. He may still have mercy on you in the end if you don't do it, but you still want to plan to repent, to start doing that thing, and ask Him to grant it to you and to enable you to do it. But you don't just reject the law. If you reject the law, you become something else. You can become something else. You can leave Islam. Now, if you don't implement the law, that just means you're sinning. If it's fard. Okay, if you don't do something fard, then you're sinning. Okay, sinners still go to heaven. Everybody goes to heaven who's a Muslim in the end. Everybody does. Now, some Muslims go through the fire, and maybe very few. You never know. We'll find out in the end. Believe in His mercy and rely on His mercy and not on your deeds. But don't ever reject the law. Okay, so if you're not eating halal, that just means you're eating meat and you're committing a sin when you eat it. And your nafs, once it knows that, it may feel kind of bad, but that doesn't mean you leave Islam because you don't want your nafs to feel bad. That's a huge mistake. I mean, that's something way different than just being a sinner. It means that you say, okay, astaghfirullah, I don't have the trust in you to stop eating meat that's not zabiha. I don't have. Just admit what you don't have and say, maybe He'll give it to me, maybe He'll give me an opening. Ask Him for the openings. You'd be surprised by what He can give you and the openings He can give you. Miracles happen all the time. There's a lot that there's some that I can't even share. They're so big that I've heard from other people, like, a certain guy in Egypt. I've heard of huge miracles happen to seemingly normal people, and they're usually the ones who no one knows, like a taxi driver or something. You have no idea who some of these people are, and you have no idea what Allah will give you. So have trust in Allah, and know that this is only good that He sent down in His law, and it's only good that we slaughter a certain way. Okay, sorry for having such long videos. I apologize. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.